At the end of verse 16, Paul says, in this way they always heap up their sins to the limit. The wrath of God has come upon them at last. Okay, so what does Paul mean here? Well, the wrath of God is referring to God's divine judgment on sin. I've often struggled with the idea of God's judgment. How can a loving God also seem so vengeful? And I can remember discussing this with a fellow student at Bible college. He was an older student from Eastern Europe, from Bosnia. And he had some experience of the consequences of war. And he looked at me and he said, you have never been a victim, have you? And it suddenly dawned on me that it's only people like me who've had a relatively comfortable and easy life who have a problem with the idea of God's judgment and justice. When you've experienced a genocide, when you've been raped, when you've seen loved ones murdered, you cry out for justice. When you see an unrepentant child abuser dying at a ripe old age, seemingly got away with it scot-free, a cruel dictator who's lived to a ripe old age in a life of luxury and comfort, when you see people being murdered simply for their faith and their belief, people cry out, where is the justice? Why doesn't God do anything? There's no justice. And Paul answers, oh yes, there is. There is justice. There will be a day of reckoning, and God will judge. In fact, if God did not judge all evil, God would not be very loving. It's because God is a God of love that He cannot and will not let evil go on indefinitely. There will be justice.